The atmospheric entry pod hissed as it settled onto the abandoned field outside the small university town. Alara Vex stepped out, her tall, slender figure silhouetted against the fading twilight. Her silver-blue skin shimmered faintly in the gathering darkness, iridescent patterns flowing beneath the surface like frozen rivers. She took her first breath of Earth air, heavy, warm, almost oppressive compared to the crystalline atmosphere of Cryos. Acclimation complete, she whispered into her wrist communicator. Beginning observation protocol 793. 6 cycles had passed since Commander Tarek's death during the Orion conflict. 6 cycles of emptiness, of mechanical existence. The High Council had suggested this Earth assignment as rehabilitation, a chance to immerse herself in work and recover from the void left by her mate's passing. Scientific observations suited her current state, detached, methodical, free from emotional complications. Alara retrieved her integration kit, activating the molecular restructuring field that would help her blend in with humans. Her skin tone warmed to a deep olive, the luminescent patterns fading to nearly invisible. Only her eyes, large and vertically slitted with violet irises, required specialized contacts. Her pointed ears rounded, and her 7-fingered hands transformed into the typical human 5-digit configuration. It wasn't perfect, but it would pass casual inspection. The university's Department of Comparative Anthropology had approved her research exchange, believing her to be from a remote Nordic institute. Her true mission, to study human emotional bonding patterns, remained classified. The following morning, Alara entered Professor Mason Hayes' classroom, taking a seat at the back. His lecture on cultural resilience in post-crisis communities aligned with her research parameters. She observed him with clinical interest, approximately 40 Earth years old, tall with a sturdy build, brown skin, and expressive hands that punctuated his words with surprising grace. Connection, Mason told his students, is what saved humanity through countless disasters. Not technology, not wealth, but our capacity to reach for each other in darkness. Something in Alara's chest tightened. On Cryos, emotional control was revered. Here, this human spoke of vulnerability as strength. After class, she approached him. Professor Hayes, I am Dr. Alara Vex. I request access to your research archives on communal bonding structures. Mason's eyebrows rose at her formal tone, but his smile remained genuine. Of course, Dr. Vex. Would you like to discuss your research over coffee? Unnecessary, she replied curtly. Data transfer is sufficient. His smile didn't falter. In my experience, conversations often reveal insights that formal data doesn't capture. But I understand if you prefer otherwise. 3 days later, disaster struck during Alara's observation of a campus social gathering. Her temperature regulator malfunctioned, causing her skin to cool dramatically. A student accidentally brushed against her arm and gasped at the unnatural cold. What's wrong with you? The student exclaimed, drawing unwanted attention. Alara froze, acutely aware of curious eyes turning toward her. Her training hadn't prepared her for equipment failure. Dr. Vex's Raynaud syndrome, came Mason's calm voice as he appeared beside her. It affects circulation. Nothing contagious, nothing to worry about. He casually draped his jacket over her shoulders, the warm weight of it both foreign and comforting. Come on, I'll walk you to medical services. Once away from the crowd, he guided her not toward the medical center but to his office. You're not human, he said quietly, closing the door. Alara stiffened. That isn't a logical conclusion. I've spent 15 years studying indigenous cultures across Earth. I know when someone is not just foreign, but not from here. His eyes were kind, without fear. Your speech patterns, the way you observe rather than participate, and yes, skin cold enough to make someone yelp. I don't know what you are, but I'm not your enemy. I should report this breach, she said, her voice hollow. Protocol demanded immediate extraction if discovered. Or, Mason suggested, you could trust me to keep your secret and actually help your research. Whatever you're studying, having a guide would be more efficient than struggling alone. Alara's training warned against emotional entanglements with observation subjects. Yet logic suggested his assistance would improve her mission outcomes. That was all, a tactical adjustment. Why would you help me? She asked. Mason's smile returned, reaching his eyes with surprising warmth. Because everyone deserves kindness when they're far from home. Even mysterious researchers with cold skin and formal speech patterns. For the first time since Tarek's death, something inside Alara's frozen heart shifted, imperceptible, but present. like the first crack in a glacier at the coming of spring. I'm not what you think, she finally said. I figured that much, Mason replied. But I'd like to learn who you really are. Your respiratory system is remarkably inefficient, Alara observed, watching Mason jog in place to keep warm as they stood on the university observatory deck. The autumn night had brought the first frost, coating the telescope dome in crystalline patterns that reminded her of home. Thanks for the compliment. Mason laughed, his breath forming clouds in the cold air. Not all of us evolved on ice planets. 3 weeks had passed since he'd discovered her secret. Instead of reporting her to his authorities as she'd feared, Mason had become an unexpected ally, helping her understand human cultural nuances her briefings had missed. In return, she'd shared carefully selected information about Cryos and her people. The Andromeda cluster looks particularly vibrant tonight, she noted, adjusting the telescope with practiced precision. Astronomy provided neutral territory between them, scientific, yet beautiful enough to bridge their worlds. It's strange, Mason said, moving closer to look through the eyepiece. I've studied the stars my whole life, but seeing them through your eyes makes everything feel new. His proximity disrupted her concentration. The warmth radiating from his body triggered an involuntary physiological response. The bioluminescent patterns beneath her skin pulsed briefly before she suppressed them. Your core temperature is distracting, she stated, stepping away. Mason's smile didn't waver. That's the most alien way anyone's ever told me I'm hot. I meant, she began, then recognized his teasing. Human humor still confounded her. You're being facetious. Only partly. His expression grew more serious. Alara, in 3 weeks, you've cataloged human cultural practices, analyzed our entertainment, even studied our grief rituals, but you never participate. You observe life instead of living it. That is my function here. Her voice cooled several degrees. I am a researcher, not a participant. Is that why you came to Earth? Or are you hiding from something? The question struck like a blade between her ribs. On Cryos, speaking of personal loss violated social protocol. Grief was managed privately, sealed away like hazardous material. My personal circumstances are irrelevant to my mission, she replied stiffly. Mason touched her arm gently. I've worked with enough trauma survivors to recognize the signs. You're running from pain, throwing yourself into work. Human or alien, some behaviors are universal. She pulled away. You overstep, Professor Hayes. Mason, he corrected. And yes, probably. But sometimes overstepping is the only way to reach someone who's built walls around themselves. Thunder rolled in the distance. The weather forecast had predicted a severe storm system, information Alara had noted but dismissed. Her temporary research station on the outskirts of town had seemed adequate shelter. You should return to your dwelling, she said, closing her observation journal. Your primitive carbon fiber skeleton is susceptible to electrical discharge damage. He laughed again. That might be the most concerned anyone's been about my primitive skeleton. What about you? That metal container you call a research station won't be safe and lightning. I have managed worse conditions. Raindrops began pelting the observatory dome as they descended the stairs. By the time they reached the parking lot, the storm had intensified dramatically. Wind whipped rain sideways, and lightning split the sky in jagged bursts. This is ridiculous, Mason shouted over the deluge. My house is 15 minutes away. You're staying with me tonight. Unnecessary, Alara insisted, though her environmental sensors were already warning of dangerous conditions. A tremendous crack sounded as lightning struck a nearby transformer. Sparks showered down, and the university plunged into darkness. That wasn't a request, Mason said, grabbing her hand and pulling her toward his vehicle. His hand felt like fire against her naturally cool skin, the sensation shockingly intimate. On Cryos, casual touch between non-mates was rare, yet she found herself not withdrawing. Mason's home was a small cottage surrounded by trees at the edge of town. Inside, he moved efficiently in the dark, lighting candles that cast the space in warm, flickering light. Books lined every wall, interspersed with artifacts from his global travels. It was chaotic but undeniably him. The power grid may be compromised for hours, Alara noted, scanning the room with thinly veiled curiosity. Good thing I've got plenty of candles and an old-fashioned fireplace. Mason knelt by the hearth, arranging kindling. Make yourself comfortable. Comfort was an irrelevant parameter, But Alara found herself drawn to a particular shelf containing small carved animals from various Earth regions. She lifted a wooden fox, its details remarkably precise. "My mother made those," Mason said, watching her as flames began to catch in the fireplace. "She was an artist." "Was," Alara repeated, understanding the implication. "You've experienced familial dissolution. If you mean I've lost family, yes." He stood, the firelight dancing across his features. "My mother died when I was 22. Cancer. Yet you speak of her without apparent distress." "Oh, there's still pain," he admitted, moving closer. "But there's also joy in remembering her. The grief changes form over time, becomes something you can carry without breaking." Alara replaced the carving precisely where she'd found it. "On Cryos, we do not speak of the departed. It is considered destabilizing." "Is that why you never speak of your mate?" Her head snapped up. "How did you?" "Your left hand. You touch the third finger sometimes, like you're feeling for something that should be there. On Earth, that's where many cultures wear marriage bands." Alara felt exposed, as if Mason had somehow seen through her molecular restructuring field to her true form. "Tarek died in the Orion conflict," she said, the words feeling like shards of ice in her throat. "He commanded our defensive fleet. I was a tactical advisor. I calculated the probabilities. I was wrong." She hadn't intended to confess this. Not to herself. Not to this human who somehow dismantled her carefully constructed barriers with simple observations and kindness. "I'm so sorry, Alara." "Sorry changes nothing. He is gone. Our intended offspring will never exist. I failed him." Without warning, Mason stepped forward and embraced her. The shock of full body contact froze her in place, the heat of him, the strange softness of his clothing, the steady rhythm of his heartbeat against her chest. No one had touched her since Tarek. "This is inappropriate," she whispered, not moving away. "Maybe," he acknowledged. "But sometimes inappropriate is exactly what we need." Outside, the storm raged on, but inside something equally powerful and dangerous was brewing, a thaw Alara had neither anticipated nor prepared for in her careful research plans. The storm had passed, but Alara remained at Mason's cottage. What began as a single night shelter had extended to 3 days as flooding cut off the road to her research station. At least, that was the rationale she presented in her daily reports to the High Council. The truth that she found herself reluctant to leave was a complication she refused to analyze. "You're supposed to stir it before it sticks," Mason called from across the kitchen as Alara stared intently at the bubbling pot of what he called comfort food. "The physical properties of this substance defy logic," she replied, cautiously moving the wooden spoon through the thickening oatmeal. "It transforms from liquid to solid in unpredictable patterns." Mason moved behind her, his hand covering hers on the spoon. "Like this," he demonstrated, guiding her through the circular motion. "Cooking is part science, part intuition." His chest pressed against her back, warm and solid. The proximity triggered her species' natural response. Faint bioluminescent patterns appeared beneath her olive-toned skin, creating a subtle glow visible only in the shadows between them. "You're lighting up again," he murmured, his breath against her ear sending unexpected sensations down her spine. Alara stiffened. "A physiological response I cannot fully suppress in this form." "It is embarrassing." "It's beautiful," Mason countered, releasing her hand but not stepping away. "On Earth, we have creatures that create light, fireflies, certain deep-sea fish. But nothing as elegant as you." His words provoked an unfamiliar flutter in her secondary cardiac chamber. "You should not say such things." "Why not?" "Because they create complications." Mason smiled, finally stepping back to retrieve bowls from a cabinet. "Life is complications, Alara. That's what makes it interesting." Later, as rain resumed its gentle patter against the windows, Mason rummaged through an antique storage unit, extracting a small device. "What is that primitive apparatus?" Alara asked from her position on the couch, where she had been reviewing her increasingly subjective research notes. "This primitive apparatus is a record player," he said with mock indignation. "Some Earth music needs to be experienced the way it was originally played." The vinyl disc spun, and rich, mellow tones filled the small living room. A woman's voice, deep and soulful, sang of stars and longing. "Ella Fitzgerald," Mason explained, extending his hand toward Alara. "May I have this dance?" She blinked in confusion. "I have not studied the social ritual." "Perfect time to learn." He pulled her gently to her feet. "Put your hand here," he guided her palm to his shoulder. And I'll put mine here. His hand rested lightly at her waist, sending cascades of light rippling beneath her skin. Then we hold hands like this, and move together. The concept seemed simple, yet the execution felt overwhelmingly intimate. Their bodies moved in proximity, finding rhythm together. Mason hummed along with the music, the vibration from his chest transferring to hers where they nearly touched. "This is how humans court each other?" she asked, trying to maintain scientific detachment. "Sometimes," he answered, twirling her unexpectedly and drawing a surprised gasp. "Sometimes it's just a way to feel connected." "Connected," she repeated softly. As a tactical analyst, she understood connections, fleet formations, defense grids, communication networks. But this was different, organic, unpredictable, dangerously compelling. The music shifted to something slower. Mason drew her closer, eliminating the carefully maintained space between them. The full contact of their bodies caused her temperature regulation system to falter, sending waves of iridescent patterns coursing beneath her skin. "Your heart is racing," he observed, his hand sliding from her waist to the small of her back. "I have too," she replied, her voice uncharacteristically breathless. "They both are." He smiled, the expression crinkling the corners of his eyes. "Is that a good thing?" "I'm uncertain." They had stopped moving, though the music continued. Mason's gaze dropped to her lips, and Alara found herself analyzing every detail of his face, the slight asymmetry of his features, the tiny scar above his left eyebrow, the warmth in his dark eyes. "I should warn you," he murmured. "I'm thinking about kissing you." Her scientific mind raced through the implications: biological incompatibility, mission compromise, cultural taboos. But for once, her analytical prowess failed her. Logic dissolved beneath a more primitive desire. "That would be unwise," she whispered. "Probably," he agreed, not moving away. "I am not what you perceive. This form is merely an approximation. I know exactly what you are, Alara." His hand moved to cup her face, thumb tracing her cheekbone. "You're someone who's been frozen in grief, afraid to feel anything again. I recognize it because I've been there too." His lips met hers, gentle and questioning. The sensation was foreign yet instinctively right, like discovering a mathematical constant she'd always known must exist, but had never proven. Her luminescence flared, bathing them both in soft blue light as she hesitantly returned the kiss. When they separated, Alara struggled to categorize the experience within her research parameters. "This contradicts protocol," she said weakly. "Do you want to stop?" Mason asked, his hands still holding her as if she were precious. The truthful answer terrified her. "No." His bedroom was simple, yet personal. Photographs on the walls, books stacked on the nightstand, a large window framing the star-filled sky now visible as the clouds parted. Mason's hands trembled slightly as he helped her remove her adaptive clothing, his reverence making her feel not like a specimen, but something treasured. "You should know," she said, as her molecular field thinned, revealing more of her true form. "Intimate relations between our species have certain differences." The patterns beneath her skin glowed brighter now, pulsing with her accelerated heartbeats. Her natural skin, silver blue and slightly textured, emerged in patches. Mason looked at her with wonder rather than repulsion. "Show me," he whispered. "Show me who you really are." For the first time since arriving on Earth, Alara deactivated her molecular restructuring field completely. She stood before him in her true form, taller, more angular, her skin luminescent in the darkness, eyes large and violet without the contacts. Mason's breath caught, but not in fear. "You're extraordinary," he said, reaching out to trace the glowing patterns that ebbed and flowed beneath her skin. Where he touched, the light intensified, responding to his warmth. "Among my kind," she explained softly as he explored her alien physiology with gentle hands. "Physical intimacy creates a form of bioluminescent conversation. Our bodies speak to each other." "Then let's talk," Mason said, drawing her down beside him on the bed. Their bodies learned each other's languages slowly, with patience and wonder. Every touch generated new patterns of light that spread across Alara's skin, communicating pleasure in ways words never could. Mason followed those patterns with his lips and fingers, discovering sensitive places unique to her species that made her gasp and glow brighter. When they finally joined, Alara's luminescence enveloped them both, casting the room in ethereal blue light that pulsed with their shared rhythm. It was unlike anything she had experienced even with Tarek, perhaps because with Mason, she withheld nothing, not her true form, not her vulnerability, not the broken pieces of herself she had kept hidden for so long. As they lay tangled together, Mason traced the gradually fading light patterns across her collarbone. "What does this one mean?" he asked softly. Alara hesitated, then surrendered to the truth. "It means I am thawing. Your report frequencies have decreased by 63%. Director Valen's holographic image flickered in the darkness of Alara's research station. "The Council requires explanation." 2 months had passed since the storm, 2 months of dividing her time between perfunctory research and increasingly lengthy stays at Mason's cottage. 2 months of discovering that her heart could beat for someone new. "Atmospheric interference has compromised transmission capabilities," Alara lied, maintaining the emotionless facade expected of her. "I have condensed my findings for efficiency." The director's 4 eyes narrowed, pupils contracting to pinpoints. "Our scans indicate no such interference. However, they do show your molecular restructuring field has been deactivated with increasing frequency." Ice formed in Alara's veins. They had been monitoring her physiological patterns. Of course they had. "Field maintenance requires periodic recalibration," she countered. "And does it require extended proximity to a specific human subject?" "One not mentioned in your official observation logs." Alara's luminescent patterns betrayed her alarm before she could suppress them. "I have cultivated a research asset with specialized knowledge of human cultural bonding rituals." "You have compromised your objectivity," Director Valen stated flatly. "Worse, you have engaged in physiological interactions with a lesser species. The data stream during your field deactivations was explicit." Shame and anger flared within her simultaneously. The intimacy she had shared with Mason, the beautiful, private language their bodies had created together, reduced to illicit data streams for the Council's judgment. "The mission parameters included studying human emotional bonding," she said, fighting to keep her voice level. "Observation, researcher Vex. Not participation." The director's tone could have frozen nitrogen. "Especially not after your emotional compromise during the Orion conflict. The Council assigned this mission as rehabilitation, not permission for further destabilization." The mention of her past failure struck like a physical blow. "My judgment remains sound. Evidence suggests otherwise. You will terminate contact with the human subject and prepare for extraction. Your replacement arrives in 7 standard days." The hologram dissolved, leaving Alara alone in the darkness. "You've been quiet all evening," Mason said, his fingers tracing lazy patterns across her bare back as they lay in his bed. Outside, the first snow of winter dusted the countryside. "Something on your mind?" How could she explain that her time on Earth was ending? That the Council considered their relationship a contamination rather than a healing? That despite her people's advanced technology, they remained emotionally primitive in ways that now seemed unbearable? "The university faculty gathering today," she said instead. "Your colleagues were uncomfortable with my presence." Mason sighed. "Just Dr. Whitaker being an ass. He's always been threatened by anyone he can't immediately categorize." She had noticed the whispers, the wary glances when Mason had introduced her as his partner. Their relationship had transitioned from private sanctuary to public knowledge, and not everyone welcomed the mysterious foreign researcher who had captured the popular professor's attention. "It is not merely discomfort," Alara said, sitting up to face him. "It is instinctive species preservation. Humans recognize, even subconsciously, that I am other. Some humans are just xenophobic jerks," Mason countered, pulling her back into his arms. "Others are fascinated by differences. Like me. Fascination is not a sustainable foundation for pair bonding," she said, the words hollow in her chest. Mason propped himself up on one elbow, suddenly alert. "Pair bonding? Is that what we're doing?" Alara's patterns flared with anxiety. "I spoke imprecisely." "No, you didn't." His eyes searched hers. "Alara, are we just an experiment to you? A case study in human emotional bonding?" "Of course not," she said, the force of her response surprising them both. "Then what are we?" "Because I'm falling in love with you, and I need to know if I'm alone in this." The human phrase, falling in love, seemed inadequate for the transformation she had undergone. Love on cryos was measured in compatibility indicators and genetic optimization. What she felt for Mason defied such clinical assessment. "You are not alone," she admitted, her patterns pulsing with the truth of it. "But there are complexities you cannot understand. Try me." His hand found hers, warm and steady. My natural lifespan is approximately 300 of your Earth years, she began. Our biological systems are fundamentally incompatible for reproduction. My world exists in a state of perpetual winter that would kill you within hours. Your atmosphere is barely tolerable to me for extended periods without supplements. The Council has ordered me to terminate all contact with you and prepare for extraction within 7 days. She had not meant to reveal that last part. Mason sat fully upright. They're taking you away. My mission was temporary. You knew this. I knew you were here to study us. I didn't know you were reporting back to some council that monitors our intimacy. Jesus, Alara, have they been watching us? The hurt in his voice wounded her more deeply than the director's condemnation. Not visually. They monitor physiological data only. It is standard procedure for all field researchers to ensure safety. Safety? Mason ran a hand through his hair in frustration. So what? I'm considered a threat? No. I am. Alara stood, pacing the small bedroom. My emotional involvement with you violates protocol. After Tarek, after my failure that cost thousands of lives, the Council questions my judgment. They're not wrong to do so. So that's it. You're just going to leave because some alien bureaucrats decided our relationship is against the rules. It is more complicated. It's exactly that simple. Mason cut her off, his voice rising. You're choosing their rules over what we've found together. I am trying to protect you. Her control slipped, patterns flashing across her skin in agitated bursts. The Council can erase you if they deem it necessary. They can erase this entire town to protect our secrecy. The declaration hung between them, terrible in its implications. Would you let them? Mason asked, his voice dangerously quiet. Alara closed her eyes. I don't know. The silence that followed felt like a chasm opening between worlds. I need some air, Mason finally said, grabbing his clothes. Don't wait up. After he left, Alara stood by the window watching snowflakes dance in the moonlight. The delicate crystals reminded her of home, of the life she had known before everything changed. Before Mason showed her that warmth could exist in coldness, that broken pieces could form new patterns. Her communicator pulsed with an incoming message. Expecting another reprimand from the director, she was surprised to see it was from her research assistant on Cryos. Unauthorized data transfer detected, the message read. Origin, Earth Historical Archives. Subject, Cryos human contact during the heliocarbon era. Initiator, Professor Mason Hayes. Mason was researching her world, searching for precedent, for solutions. Even angry, even hurt, he was fighting for them. The realization broke something free inside her, the last frozen fragment of the tactical analyst, who had lost everything and retreated into dutiful obedience. Director Valen was wrong. Her judgment wasn't compromised by emotion, it had been compromised by its absence. When Mason returned hours later, snow melting in his hair, Alara was waiting. I cannot stay, she said before he could speak, but I will not leave on their terms. We have 7 days. Help me find another way. The university observatory dome gleamed silver under the full moon, snow crystallizing on its curved surface. Inside, surrounded by star charts and ancient texts, Mason and Alara worked through their final night together. The heliocarbon era records confirm it, Mason said, his voice hoarse from hours of discussion. There was a settlement, Cryosians and humans living together in the Arctic Circle almost 2,000 years ago. Alara studied the historical documents he had uncovered through his academic connections. The Council suppressed this information. These interactions predate our modern contact protocols. They were successful for nearly a century before volcanic activity forced evacuation, Mason continued, excitement building. It proves compatible habitation is possible. 6 days of frantic research had led to this discovery, evidence that her people had once maintained a remote outpost where both species could survive. The implications were revolutionary, yet terrifying in their simplicity. Even if possible, Alara said, the Council will never sanction it. They consider your species unprepared for formal contact. Then we don't ask for formal contact. Mason knelt before her, taking her hands in his. We ask for a research extension. An anthropological study of human Cryosian cohabitation. 1 subject from each species. Alara's patterns pulsed with conflicting emotions. You would leave everything, your career, your home, your world, for an experiment. Not for an experiment. His eyes held hers steadily. For you. A communication alert chimed from her wrist device. The extraction team has entered your solar system, she translated grimly. Arrival in 23 Earth hours. Mason squeezed her hands. Then we need to make our case now. Alara activated her full communication array, the technology transforming a section of the observatory into a holographic projection chamber. Within moments, Director Valen's image materialized before them. Researcher Vex, the director acknowledged coldly. This is an unauthorized communication, and you have exposed our technology to a human subject. This human subject has discovered what you have hidden from our own historical records, Alara replied, her voice steady despite her racing heartbeats. Ancient cooperation between our species. The director's expression didn't change. Irrelevant primitive history. Your extraction proceeds as scheduled. I petitioned the Council for extended research parameters, Alara continued formally. A controlled study of interspecies adaptation based on historical precedent. Petition denied. Your judgment remains compromised. Then I will invoke the right of personal truth before the Council. Alara's luminescent patterns flared with determination. My mate died believing our species must remain isolated to survive. I once believed this too. We were wrong. The director's 4 eyes blinked in rapid succession, a sign of surprise. The right has not been invoked in 7 generations. Yet it remains our most sacred law, Alara pressed. Any cryosian may challenge Council directive if they can prove it contradicts the evolutionary good of our species. Mason watched in confusion as the exchange continued in Alara's native language, a crystalline, mathematical series of sounds no human vocal cords could reproduce. The director's hologram flickered as more council members joined the projection, their tall, angular forms crowding the small observatory. After what seemed like hours, Alara turned to Mason, her patterns pulsing with cautious hope. The council has agreed to consider my petition, she explained. But they require proof of viability. They require me. You must address them. No human has ever done so formally. Mason straightened his shoulders. What should I say? The truth, she replied simply. They will accept nothing less. He stepped forward into the circle of alien observers, their silver-blue forms towering over him. For a moment, he faltered under their collective gaze. Then he looked at Alara, at the woman who had arrived as a cold, distant observer and had thawed into something magnificent through the simple act of allowing herself to feel again. Members of the Cryos High Council, he began, I stand before you not as a representative of Earth, but as a man who loves one of your own. I cannot offer political alliances or technological exchanges. I can only offer what humans have always found most valuable, a shared future. He spoke of the historical settlement, of the possibility of a research outpost in Earth's Arctic regions where both species could thrive. He spoke of the scientific value of controlled cultural exchange. But mostly, he spoke of Alara, of her courage, her intelligence, her growth. She came to us broken, he said, his voice resonating with emotion. She believed her capacity for connection had died with her mate. I think many of you understand that feeling. But isolation isn't the answer, not for individuals, not for species. Connection is why we look to the stars in the first place. When he finished, there was silence. Then Director Valen spoke, addressing Alara. The human speaks with surprising wisdom, but feelings are insufficient foundation for such precedent. With respect, Director, Alara countered, moving to stand beside Mason. Feelings are precisely what have been missing from our relations with other species. We retreated after the Orion conflict, believing emotional distance would protect us. Instead, it has limited us. Her hand found Mason's, their fingers intertwining. I am not rejecting my world or my duties. I am proposing an expansion of both. A research outpost where humans and cryosians can learn from each other, starting with the two of us. The council members conferred in rapid, crystalline exchanges. Finally, the eldest member stepped forward. The right of personal truth compels us to consider alternatives, the elder announced. A provisional research outpost is approved. 1 cryosian, 1 human, in Earth's northernmost territories. Regular reports required. Duration, 5 Earth years. Relief flooded through Alara, her patterns flowing in waves of joy. 5 years, a heartbeat to her kind, but enough time to prove their case. However, the elder continued, no biological integration is sanctioned. No offspring. Understood, Alara replied formally, though the prohibition stung. She and Mason had already discussed the impossibility of children between their species, but having it codified as law felt different. The extraction team will transport necessary equipment to your chosen location, Director Valen added, clearly displeased with the council's decision. You will remain under observation. We expected nothing less, Mason replied with surprising diplomacy. After the council's holograms faded, he turned to Alara in the sudden quiet of the observatory. 5 years in the Arctic Circle with alien surveillance. Not exactly the romantic getaway most couples dream about. Do you regret your decision? She asked, suddenly uncertain. In answer, Mason pulled her into a kiss that left her pattern swirling with brilliant light. Not for a second. But I do have one condition. From his pocket, he withdrew a small object, a ring of silver metal inlaid with tiny blue stones that matched her natural skin tone. On Earth, we have this tradition, he said, his voice unexpectedly nervous. When two people decide to build a life together, they exchange rings as symbols of their commitment. I am familiar with the custom, Alara said, her voice barely above a whisper, though I believed it was reserved for those with permanent intentions. 5 years, 500, however long we get. I want all of it. He held the ring between them. Will you marry me, Alara? Not just for research, not just for our worlds, but for us. The patterns beneath her skin formed a configuration she had never displayed before, an intricate, radiant geometry that reflected the complex equation of finding love after loss, of building something new from broken pieces. In Cryosian tradition, she said, taking the ring, when one chooses a mate, they offer a truth never shared with others. She slipped the ring onto her finger, where it gleamed against her luminescent skin. My truth is this. I never expected to feel complete again after Tarek. I never expected you, Mason Hayes. You have redefined my understanding of possibility. She pressed her palm to his chest, directly over his heart, and her patterns flowed from her skin to his, a temporary transfer that left glowing symbols etched across his skin like living tattoos. What does it mean? He asked, looking down in wonder at the alien script written in light across his body. It is the oldest pledge of my people, she translated, her voice thick with emotion. Where you go, I follow. What you build, I strengthen. When you falter, I remain. Beyond stars, beyond time, beyond separation. Mason repeated the words back to her, his human voice transforming the ancient pledge into something new yet equally sacred. Outside the observatory, dawn broke over the snow-covered landscape. In 20 hours, the extraction team would arrive, transporting them to the beginning of their unprecedented journey. There would be challenges, biological differences to navigate, cultural misunderstandings to resolve, skeptics from both worlds to convince. But as the first light of Earth's sun illuminated the observatory dome, casting rainbow prisms across their entwined figures, Alara knew with scientific certainty that some elements could transform under the right conditions, ice into water, grief into growth, strangers into family. And sometimes, against all statistical probability, a cold, broken alien widow could find warmth in the most unexpected place of all, the heart of a human who saw not her differences but her possibilities.